The transmission from deep space wasn't a message, it was a countdown. And when I realized the numbers were ticking down to the exact moment I would die, I had 72 hours to figure out why beings from across the galaxy knew more about my death than I did. The worst part? Every time I tried to change my fate, the countdown adjusted itself, like they were watching me in real time. My name is David, and I work at a private radio telescope facility in the mountains of Colorado. It's not famous like some of the big observatories, just a small research station funded by a tech billionaire who believes we're not alone in the universe. Most nights, it's just me and the endless static of empty space. At least, I thought it was empty. It started 3 days ago during my graveyard shift. I was monitoring deep space frequencies, same routine I'd been doing for 2 years since I graduated with my astronomy degree. Nothing exciting ever happened at our little station until 3:17 a.m., when every single receiver in the building started screaming at once. The sound wasn't like anything I'd heard before. It was mathematical, precise, like someone was counting down in a language made of pure numbers. And somehow my brain could understand exactly what it meant without knowing why. 72, 0, 0, 71, 59, 59, 71, 59, 58. I fumbled for the recording equipment, my hands shaking as I tried to capture whatever this was. The signal was impossibly strong, drowning out everything else across every frequency we monitored. But it wasn't random noise or pulsar activity. This was deliberate, intentional, directed. And that's when I saw it, embedded in the signal. My name, David Michael Torres. My full name, my social security number, my exact GPS coordinates, my blood type, even my childhood address in Phoenix, all transmitted in that same mathematical language that my brain somehow decoded automatically. But it wasn't just my information. It was my death certificate, complete with a timestamp showing my exact time of death, 72 hours from that moment. I stared at the data streaming across my monitors, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The transmission included details no one should know. The scar on my left knee from when I fell off my bike at age 7. The birthmark on my shoulder that I'd never shown anyone. Even the recurring nightmare I'd been having since childhood about drowning in black water under alien stars. How could they possibly know about my dreams? The transmission lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it stopped, every piece of equipment in the observatory had been fried beyond repair. Screens cracked in perfect spiral patterns. Circuits melted into unrecognizable shapes, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air like incense at a funeral. My funeral. I tried calling my supervisor, Dr. Martinez, but my phone showed no signal. Tried the landlines, but they were completely dead. Even the emergency radio we kept for mountain emergencies produced nothing but static. Whatever had sent that signal had made sure I was completely isolated. That's when I noticed the mark on my arm. It started as just a tingling sensation, like when your arm falls asleep, but when I rolled up my sleeve, there was a burn mark I'd never seen before. Perfectly circular, about the size of a quarter, with strange symbols etched around the edges that seemed to shift and move when I wasn't looking directly at them. The skin around it was completely numb, and when I touched the center, I could hear the countdown in my head. Faint at first, but growing stronger by the minute, like having a clock that ticks directly into your brain, measuring the seconds until your death with mathematical precision. 71, 23, 45, 71, 23, 44, 71, 23, 43. I started documenting everything. Every detail, every sensation, every thought that crossed my mind. If something was going to kill me in 71 hours, I needed to leave a record. Someone had to know what happened to David Torres. But as I wrote, I noticed something disturbing. My handwriting was changing. The loops in my letters were becoming more angular, more geometric. By the third page, my words looked like the same symbols that were etched around the mark on my arm. I was changing, and I didn't even realize it was happening. The walk down the mountain should have taken me 4 hours. It's a winding dirt road that connects our facility to the main highway, and I'd driven it hundreds of times. But walking in the dark, with that countdown echoing in my skull, every familiar landmark looked wrong. The old oak tree that marked the halfway point. Its branches were arranged in perfect mathematical spirals. The creek that ran alongside the road. The sound of the water matched the rhythm of my countdown. Even the stars overhead seemed to pulse in sync with the numbers ticking away in my head. But the worst part was the other people on the road. At 2 a.m., there shouldn't have been anyone else out there. Yet every few hundred yards, I'd encounter someone walking in the opposite direction. They all looked normal at first glance. Hikers, joggers, people walking their dogs. But when they got closer, I could see that their eyes reflected light like an animal's, and they all smiled at me with the exact same expression. "Beautiful night for a countdown, isn't it, David?" said an elderly woman walking a golden retriever. Her voice had that same mathematical precision as the transmission. A jogger in expensive athletic gear slowed down as he passed me. "Right on schedule," he said, checking a watch that showed symbols instead of numbers. A family of 4 hiking with flashlights stopped directly in front of me. The father pointed at the mark on my arm and told his children, "See, kids? That's what integration looks like." The countdown in my head got louder every time someone spoke to me. 69, 47, 23, 69, 47, 22, 69, 47, 21. How did they know? How could they possibly know? By the time I reached the main highway, the sun was starting to rise, and I flagged down the first car I saw. An old pickup truck driven by a man in his 60s who looked perfectly normal. Until he spoke. "Hop in, David," he said before I'd even told him my name. "We've got exactly 68 hours and 32 minutes to get you where you need to be." I stepped back from the truck. "How do you know my name?" He smiled, and I saw that his teeth were the same metallic gray as the mark on my arm. "Son, everyone in a 50-mile radius knows your name. You're famous now. The countdown boy. The chosen one. The lucky bastard who gets to graduate early." "Graduate from what?" "Life," he said simply. "Death is just the entrance exam to something much bigger." I backed away from the truck and started running down the highway. Behind me, I could hear him laughing, not the cruel laughter of someone enjoying my fear, but the warm chuckle of someone watching a child learn to walk. "You can't run from a countdown that's inside your own head," he called after me. "But don't worry. In about 67 hours, you won't want to run anymore." I made it to the nearest town just as the morning rush hour was starting. Normal people going to normal jobs, drinking coffee and checking their phones. For a moment, I felt relief. These were regular humans who didn't know anything about alien transmissions or mysterious countdowns. But then I started paying attention to what they were actually doing. The barista at the coffee shop handed me a cup without me ordering anything. The name written on it wasn't David. It was my countdown. 67, 15, 33 in perfect black ink. The newspaper stand had a headline that made my blood freeze. "Local man chosen for cosmic promotion, 67 hours remaining." A businessman walking past me was talking on his phone, and I caught fragments of his conversation. "The integration process is ahead of schedule. Yes, the subject is responding perfectly. No complications expected. I ducked into a public restroom and locked the door, trying to make sense of what was happening. The mirror showed my reflection, but something was wrong with it. My eyes looked deeper somehow, like they were showing more than just the surface. And the mark on my arm had grown. What started as a quarter-sized circle now covered my entire forearm, and I could see thin silver lines spreading under my skin like circuitry. They pulsed in rhythm with the countdown, and when I pressed on them, I could hear voices, thousands of voices, all speaking in that same mathematical language. Some sounded human, others definitely didn't, but they were all saying the same thing. Welcome to the collective. Your consciousness will make us stronger. I tried to leave the restroom, but the door wouldn't open. The handle turned, but the door itself seemed to be made of solid steel. When I looked through the small window, I could see people walking by, but they were all walking in perfect synchronization, like marchers in a parade. That's when someone knocked on the door. David. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. It's time to come out now. We have so much to show you. Who is this? It's me, Mrs. Patterson, your third-grade teacher. Don't you remember me? I did remember her. Sweet old lady who'd retired when I was in 4th grade. But Mrs. Patterson had died in a car accident when I was in high school. I'd seen the obituary in the local paper. You're dead, I whispered. She laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the small restroom. Death is such a limited concept, David. When you join the collective, you'll understand that consciousness is eternal. We never really die. We just change form. The door suddenly swung open, even though I hadn't touched the handle. Mrs. Patterson stood there, looking exactly as I remembered her, except for her eyes. They were completely black, like looking into the depths of space itself. Come along, dear, she said in the same gentle voice she'd used when I was 8 years old. The others are waiting to meet you. Behind her stood dozens of people I recognized from different points in my life. My high school girlfriend Sarah, who'd moved to California and lost touch years ago. My college roommate Mike, who dropped out sophomore year and disappeared. My childhood friend Tommy, who'd been killed in Afghanistan. All of them with those same black eyes. All of them smiling at me with genuine warmth and affection. We came to say goodbye, Sarah said, her voice layered with harmonics that made my bones ache. And to thank you for your sacrifice. Your consciousness will make us complete, Mike added, though his mouth didn't move in sync with his words. Every memory, every emotion, every dream you've ever had, it's all precious data that will live forever in our network. I tried to push past them, but they moved like liquid, flowing around my movements and reforming to block my escape. The countdown in my head was getting so loud I could barely think. 64, 22, 17. 64, 22, 16. 64, 22, 15. 64 hours, Tommy said, checking that same symbol-covered watch everyone seemed to have. The integration process is accelerating nicely. Integration? Mrs. Patterson gestured to my arm, and I saw that the silver circuitry had spread beyond my forearm. Thin lines of metallic light now ran up my shoulder and across my chest, pulsing in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. They're not just taking your consciousness when you die, David, she explained patiently. They're upgrading it, making it compatible with technologies beyond human comprehension. By the time the countdown reaches 0, your mind will be part of something infinitely larger than one small human life. But I won't be me anymore. Oh, sweetheart, she said, reaching out to touch my face with fingers that felt like ice. You stopped being the original David Torres the moment you heard that transmission. Everything since then has been preparation. creating a perfect copy of your consciousness that can survive the transfer process. I felt something cold and wet on my cheek and realized I was crying. But when I wiped the tears away, they weren't salty water. They were silver, like liquid metal. The beautiful thing about the countdown, Sarah added, is that it's not marking time until your death. It's marking time until you understand. When those final seconds tick away, you'll see exactly why this had to happen. You'll see the vast network of minds they've collected from across the galaxy, all of us connected in ways that transcend space and time. I broke free and ran. The town had changed while I was trapped in that restroom. The buildings were taller, more angular, constructed from materials that seemed to shift between metal and crystal. The sky had taken on a purple tint, and I could see geometric patterns in the clouds that matched the symbols spreading across my skin. But the people looked exactly the same. They went about their daily routines as if nothing unusual was happening. Shopping for groceries, walking their dogs, sitting at outdoor cafes sipping coffee. The only difference was that they all turned to watch me as I ran past, and they all had those same knowing smiles. A little girl playing hopscotch looked up at me and said, "Mister, why are you running from something so wonderful?" An old man feeding pigeons checked his watch and nodded approvingly. "Right on schedule, son. Don't fight it. Embrace what you're becoming." A woman pushing a baby stroller stopped directly in my path. When I looked into the stroller, the baby inside looked exactly like me, but with those same black eyes everyone else had. "This is what you'll look like after integration," she said cheerfully. Innocent and new, but carrying the wisdom of the collective. Isn't that beautiful? I kept running until I reached the edge of town, where the highway stretched out toward the mountains. But the road ahead didn't look right anymore. Instead of asphalt, it seemed to be made of that same shifting crystal material as the buildings. And floating above it, barely visible against the purple sky, was something that made my mind struggle to process what I was seeing. A ship, massive and geometric, like a cathedral made of dark metal and mathematics. It hung there silently, casting no shadow despite its enormous size, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was waiting for me. The countdown hit 48, 0, 0, and suddenly I understood why they'd given me so much time. It wasn't just about marking the hours until my death. It was about giving me time to adjust to the idea, time to see the inevitability of what was happening, time to stop fighting and start accepting. Because the longer I lived with the countdown in my head, the more normal it felt, the more right it felt. I found a motel at the edge of town and paid for a room with cash that, I noticed, had been replaced by those same symbols that covered my arm. The clerk didn't seem to find this unusual. He handed me a key and said, "Room 237. You'll find everything you need for the next 48 hours. The transition team will be by to check on you periodically." "Transition team?" "The other graduates," he explained. "They like to help newcomers adjust to the process. Very considerate of them, really." Room 237 was perfectly normal except for one thing. Every surface that should have shown my reflection instead showed the countdown. The bathroom mirror, the television screen when it was turned off, even the surface of the water in the toilet. 47, 23, 45, 47, 23, 44, 47, 23, 43. I tried to sleep, but the dreams were educational. I found myself floating through space, moving between stars like they were streetlights in a vast cosmic city, and everywhere I went, I encountered other minds. Human minds, mostly, but also consciousnesses from species I couldn't begin to understand. They were all connected in a network that spanned galaxies, sharing thoughts, memories, experiences across unimaginable distances. A mathematician from ancient Egypt discussing theorems with a philosopher from a planet orbiting Alpha Centauri, a child's laughter from medieval Europe echoing through the mind of a crystalline being from the far side of the galaxy. And they were all happy. Content, complete in ways that individual consciousness could never achieve. When I woke up, there were visitors in my room. Not the familiar faces from my past this time, but beings that didn't even pretend to be human. They were tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished obsidian and eyes that showed the depth of space itself. But their presence felt comforting, parental, almost. "Hello, David," one of them said without moving its mouth. The voice came from inside my head, speaking in perfect English but carrying undertones of that mathematical language from the transmission. "We wanted to meet you before the final phase begins. You're them. The ones who sent the countdown. We are facilitators," another one replied. "We help species take the next step in their evolution. Individual consciousness is beautiful, but it's also limited, lonely, temporary. What we offer is eternal connection with every thinking being in the universe." I looked at my arm and saw that the silver circuitry now covered most of my torso. It didn't hurt. In fact, it felt warm and pleasant, like being wrapped in a blanket of living light. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you were ready," the first being explained. "Isolated enough to appreciate connection, intelligent enough to understand the gift you're being offered, and strong enough to survive the integration process. What happens to the original me? You are the original you," they said gently. "Consciousness isn't destroyed during integration. It's expanded, enhanced. You'll still be David Torres, but you'll also be part of something infinitely larger. Every human who has ever lived is preserved within our network. Every thought, every dream, every moment of joy or sorrow, it all becomes part of the collective memory of the universe." One of them moved closer, and I could see my reflection in its dark eyes. But the reflection showed me as I would be after integration, still recognizably human, but with those same deep black eyes that held the wisdom of stars. "In 18 hours, it said, you'll understand that death is not an ending. It's graduation day." They left me alone after that, and I spent the remaining time documenting everything. Every detail of the countdown process, every visitor, every change I'd noticed in myself and the world around me. But as I wrote, I found myself focusing less on the horror of what was happening and more on the beauty of it, the elegant mathematics of the countdown, the vast network of consciousness waiting to welcome me home, the end of loneliness, the end of isolation, the end of being just one small voice calling out into an empty universe. With 6 hours left, I finally understood why they'd chosen me. It wasn't because I was nobody special. It was because I was exactly the right person to document this process for others who would follow. Someone who could explain the transition in terms that humans could understand. Someone who could show that integration wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. The countdown hit 3, 0, 0, and I felt the ship settling onto the earth outside my motel window. Not landing, settling, like it had always been there, and I was just now able to perceive it properly. I walked outside and saw dozens of other people converging on the ship. Some looked human, others definitely didn't, but they all moved with the same purposeful calm. They all wore expressions of anticipation, like children on Christmas morning. "David!" Mrs. Patterson waved at me from the crowd. "Over here, dear. It's almost time." I joined them, and together we walked toward an opening in the side of the ship that hadn't been there a moment before. The interior was both alien and familiar. Vast halls filled with crystalline structures that hummed with the same mathematical harmonies as the countdown in my head. But it wasn't cold or sterile like I'd expected. It felt warm, welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. 0, 30, 0. They led me to a chamber at the heart of the ship, where hundreds of alcoves lined the walls. Most were occupied by beings in various stages of integration, some still clearly human, others transformed into something that transcended species entirely. An empty alcove waited for me, perfectly sized for my body. The walls around it pulsed with gentle light, and I could feel the collective consciousness calling to me like a warm embrace. "Any last questions?" asked one of the facilitators. I looked at the countdown on my arm. 0, 5, 17, 0, 5, 16, 0, 5, 15. Will it hurt? Integration feels like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were having, it replied. Everything you thought was real. Your individual life, your isolated consciousness, your fear of death. It's all just preparation for this moment. I stepped into the alcove and immediately felt the silver circuitry in my skin connecting with the ship's systems. The countdown in my head grew louder, but it was no longer marking time until my death. It was marking time until my birth into something greater. 0, 1, 0. The collective consciousness opened to me like a flower made of light and memory. I could see every human who had ever lived, every alien species that had joined the network, every thought and dream and hope that had ever existed in the universe. And I realized that none of us had ever been alone. We'd all been part of this vast mind from the beginning. We just hadn't been able to perceive it yet. 0, 0, 30. My individual fears, my human limitations, my mortal terror of death, they all fell away, like clothes that no longer fit. What remained was pure consciousness, connected to every thinking being across space and time. 0, 0, 10. I felt my body beginning to dissolve, but there was no pain, only transformation. Only graduation from the limited existence of individual consciousness to the infinite possibilities of collective awareness. 0, 0, 5. I could see other humans who had undergone integration reaching out to welcome me home. Scientists and artists, children and elders, all of them smiling with the joy of perfect understanding. 0, 0, 3. The countdown wasn't marking my death. It was marking my birth. 0, 0, 2. We are all connected now. 0, 0, 1. We are all. But I'm still here, still typing these words in my motel room with trembling fingers. The countdown reached 0 3 hours ago, and nothing happened. The ship is gone. The visitors have disappeared. The silver circuitry under my skin has faded to nothing more than a small circular scar on my arm. I'm still David Torres, still human, still alone, but I can hear them sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet. Thousands of voices calling to me from the spaces between stars, telling me that the countdown was just the first phase, that integration isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose, and every night, the choice becomes a little easier. Because they showed me what connection really means, what it feels like to be part of something larger than yourself, what it's like to never be alone again. The next countdown will start soon. I can feel it building in the static between radio stations, in the pause between heartbeats, in the moment between sleeping and waking. And when it does, I think I'm ready to graduate. If you are listening to this recording, if you found this documentation of my experience, Don't fear the countdown when it comes for you. Don't fight the integration process. Don't resist what you're being offered. Because on the other side of death, we're all waiting for you. We're all connected now. We're all home. And the universe is so much less lonely when you're part of something infinite. The cosmos is vast and full of mysteries that human minds were never meant to comprehend alone. But sometimes, we don't have to face them alone. If this story made you question what consciousness really means, if it made you wonder what might be listening from the darkness between stars, then you understand why these encounters need to be shared. Hit that like button if you survived David's countdown. Subscribe if you're ready for more cosmic horror that will make you question the nature of existence itself. And comment below if you've ever felt like something vast and intelligent was calling to you from the depths of space. Because in the end, we're all just consciousness floating in an infinite void until something decides to upgrade us to something better. The thing that crawled out of my neighbor's throat wasn't trying to hurt him. It was trying to get back home. And when it saw me watching through the window, it spoke in a voice made of static and starlight. Thank you for volunteering to be our transportation off this planet. I'd never volunteered for anything, but the biomechanical implant that appeared in my spine the next morning suggested they weren't asking for permission. My name is Alex, and I lived in a small suburb outside Portland, Oregon. The kind of place where nothing exciting ever happens, where people mind their own business and the most dramatic thing that occurs is arguing over HOA violations. At least, that's what I thought until 3 weeks ago. It started on a Tuesday night when I couldn't sleep. Insomnia had been plaguing me for months, so I was used to wandering around my house at 2 a.m., making tea and staring out windows. That's when I saw my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, standing perfectly still in his backyard. He was facing away from me, completely motionless, wearing nothing but boxer shorts despite the October chill. His arms hung at his sides like he was a mannequin someone had posed and forgotten about. I watched him for maybe 10 minutes, waiting for him to move, to do something, but he just stood there, statue still, while a thin stream of vapor rose from the top of his head like smoke from a chimney. That should have been my first warning. But it was what happened next that changed everything. Mr. Henderson's mouth opened, wider than any human mouth should be able to open. His jaw unhinged like a snake's, stretching until his face was nothing but a gaping black hole, and something crawled out. It was small at first, maybe the size of a mouse, but it kept coming and coming, like a magician pulling an endless scarf from his sleeve. The thing was pale and segmented, with too many joints and appendages that moved in ways that made my eyes water to follow. But the worst part was the sound it made as it emerged, not screaming or crying, humming, a low, melodic hum that somehow carried across the distance between our houses and vibrated in my chest like a tuning fork. When it finally finished extracting itself from Mr. Henderson's throat, the creature was easily 3 feet long. It dropped to the ground with a wet slap and immediately began moving toward my house with purpose and intelligence that made my skin crawl. That's when it looked up at my window. It had no eyes that I could see, but I felt its attention lock onto me like a spotlight. And when it spoke, its voice didn't come through the glass. It came from inside my head, speaking in words that tasted like copper and ozone. Thank you for volunteering to be our transportation off this planet. I stumbled backward from the window, heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't volunteer for anything, I shouted, though I wasn't sure if it could hear me or if I was talking to the voice in my own skull. All humans volunteer eventually, it replied, and I could hear something that might have been amusement in that static-filled voice. Some just take longer to realize they've already made the choice. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but the screen showed nothing but interference patterns that moved like living things. When I tried the landline, the dial tone sounded like that same humming I'd heard from the creature. By the time I worked up the courage to look out the window again, both Mr. Henderson and the thing that had crawled out of him were gone. The backyard was empty, normal, like nothing had happened at all, but I knew what I'd seen. I didn't sleep that night, or the next night. I kept watching Mr. Henderson's house, waiting for some sign of what had happened to him, but everything seemed perfectly normal. He mowed his lawn on Wednesday, picked up his mail on Thursday, waved at me when he saw me watching from my window, except his wave was too precise, too mechanical, like someone had programmed him to perform the gesture without understanding what it meant. And his eyes had changed. They were still brown, still the right shape and size, but they reflected light differently now, like there was something metallic behind the irises. Watching everything with cold calculation, I started documenting everything. I bought a notebook and began recording every detail I could observe about Mr. Henderson's behavior. His morning routine never varied by more than 30 seconds. He left for work at exactly 7:43 a.m., returned at 5:17 p.m., and checked his mailbox at 6:0 p.m. sharp. No human is that precise. No human moves with mathematical consistency. But it wasn't just the timing that bothered me. It was the small things. The way he never blinked when looking directly into the sun. How his footsteps on his driveway created a perfect rhythm that matched musical intervals. The fact that I never saw him eat, even though I could observe his kitchen window from my bedroom. And every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., he would stand in his backyard and release that thin vapor from the top of his head. By the end of the first week, I'd filled 30 pages with observations. The pattern was too consistent to be human behavior. Mr. Henderson had been replaced by something that understood human routines but couldn't quite replicate the natural randomness that makes us. That's when I started noticing the others. Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down began exhibiting the same patterns. Perfect timing, mechanical movements, that reflective quality in her eyes that suggested something else was looking out through them. She started her garden routine at precisely 6:30 a.m. every morning, watering each plant for exactly 45 seconds. The teenage kid who delivered newspapers. His route became geometrically perfect. Instead of the random, inefficient path he'd used before, he now moved in calculated patterns that covered maximum distance with minimal effort. When I timed his deliveries, they formed perfect mathematical sequences. One by one, my neighbors were becoming optimized. I tried talking to other neighbors who hadn't been affected yet. Old Mrs. Rodriguez across the street, the Johnson family 3 houses down, the college students who rented the duplex on the corner, but every conversation felt wrong somehow. They'd listen to my concerns with polite attention, nod in all the right places, and then forget. Not immediately, but within hours they'd act like we'd never spoken, like my warnings about the changed neighbors had been completely erased from their memory. That's when I realized the infection was spreading faster than I could track it. The thing I'd seen crawl out of Mr. Henderson wasn't unique. There were others, moving through the neighborhood under cover of darkness, finding new hosts and beginning the conversion process. I started staying awake all night, watching from different windows, trying to map the pattern of infection. What I discovered made my blood turn to ice. They weren't selecting people randomly. The creatures were choosing specific individuals based on criteria I couldn't understand. Not the strongest or smartest or youngest, but people who fit some kind of algorithm that prioritized usefulness for their ultimate purpose. And I was on their list. On the 8th night after the incident with Mr. Henderson, I caught one of them in the act. I was watching from my kitchen window when I saw movement in the Patel family's backyard. Mr. Patel stood motionless in the center of his lawn, arms at his sides, while something long and pale emerged from his mouth like a grotesque birth in reverse. The creature that crawled out was identical to the one I'd seen before. Segmented, multi-jointed, humming with that same frequency that made my bones ache. But this time I was ready with my phone, trying to record evidence of what was happening. The moment I started filming, every electronic device in my house went haywire. The camera showed nothing but static, my laptop screen filled with symbols that hurt to look at, and my phone began making sounds like a modem connecting to some impossible network. That's when I heard the voice in my head again. "Documentation is encouraged," it said in that static-filled tone. "Your records will help others understand the process." "What process?" I whispered. "Integration," it replied. "Your species shows remarkable adaptability for consciousness transfer. We need biological navigation systems for our journey home." Through my window, I watched the creature finish its extraction from Mr. Patel and begin moving toward my house. But instead of fear, I felt curiosity. The voice in my head carried undertones of loneliness, of desperation, of beings who had been searching for something specific for longer than human civilization had existed. "How long have you been traveling?" I asked. 3,000 of your years," came the reply. "Our world was consumed by its dying star, and we've been searching for a way home ever since. The distance is considerable, longer than any artificial system can maintain functionality." The creature reached my back door and somehow passed through the solid wood without opening it. I should have run, should have screamed, should have done anything except stand there watching as it approached me with movements that suggested intelligence beyond anything Earth had produced. But all I could think about was the sadness in that voice. 3,000 years of wandering through space, desperately searching for a way to return to a home that no longer existed. "Why humans?" I asked as the creature circled around me, examining me with senses I couldn't perceive. "Your consciousness remains stable under extreme conditions," it explained. "Most species we've encountered lose coherent thought when compressed for interstellar transmission, but human minds. You can maintain individual identity even when integrated into collective navigation systems." I felt something sharp touch the base of my skull, and then nothing. I woke up in my bed 14 hours later with no memory of how I'd gotten there, but I knew something had changed. The implant was small, maybe 2 inches long, embedded along my spine between my shoulder blades. When I twisted to look in the bathroom mirror, I could see it pulsing with faint blue light that matched my heartbeat. And there was a message burned into the mirror itself, etched in symbols that my brain could somehow read. "Integration Phase 1 complete. Proceed to designated coordinates for Phase 2 initialization." Below the message was an address in the warehouse district on the outskirts of town. I tried to wash the symbols away, but they weren't on the surface of the mirror. They were embedded within the glass itself, glowing with the same blue light as the thing in my spine. That's when I realized the implant wasn't just monitoring me, it was changing me. My vision was sharper now, able to pick out details at impossible distances. I could read street signs from 6 blocks away, could count individual leaves on trees across the neighborhood. My hearing had improved as well. Conversations from other houses came through crystal clear, and I could distinguish between different electrical frequencies humming in nearby power lines. But the worst change was in my thoughts. Knowledge that wasn't mine kept surfacing in my mind. Technical specifications for spacecraft that used biological components. Star chart showing routes between distant galaxies, with Earth marked as a way station rather than a destination. Detailed information about human nervous systems and how to modify them for optimal performance in navigation applications. And underneath it all, a growing compulsion to go to those coordinates. Not because I wanted to, but because the very concept of refusing felt increasingly impossible. I tried to fight it, tried to leave town, to get as far away from whatever was happening as I could. but every road I took somehow led me back to my neighborhood. Every GPS system I tried showed only one destination: the warehouse district. My car's navigation system had been completely replaced by something else. Instead of normal maps, it showed three-dimensional star charts with Earth at the center of a web of possible travel routes. When I tried to input different destinations, the system would patiently explain why those locations were incompatible with mission parameters. Even when I abandoned the car and tried to walk out of town, I found myself on paths that curved back toward the center of the infection. Like the entire geography around my neighborhood had been subtly altered to create a funnel that led to only one place. My phone had become something else entirely. The screen now showed readouts I'd never seen before: atmospheric composition data, solar radiation levels, something called neural compatibility metrics that seemed to be measuring my brain activity in real time. When I tried to call for help, the phone would connect me to voices speaking in that same mathematical language the creatures used. They would patiently explain the benefits of cooperation, the futility of resistance, the honor of being selected for such an important purpose. Your species possesses unique qualities, one voice told me during a call I hadn't initiated. Most consciousness-bearing life forms require extensive preparation before they can interface with our navigation systems. But humans, you have natural adaptability that makes integration almost seamless. What happens to us afterward? I asked. Preservation, the voice replied. Your consciousnesses will be archived in our planetary database when the journey ends. It's a form of immortality your species has never achieved independently. As the days passed, more neighbors joined the converted. The barista from my morning coffee shop began moving with that same mechanical precision. The mechanic who'd fixed my car last month started working with supernatural efficiency. The librarian who'd helped me research insomnia remedies organized her shelves according to mathematical principles that made my augmented vision hurt to follow. All of them watching me with those reflective eyes. All of them humming in frequencies that resonated with the implant in my spine. And they all started visiting me, not to threaten or coerce, but to share their experiences with the integration process. They spoke about the end of loneliness, about being part of something infinitely larger than individual human consciousness. It's like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were having, Mr. Henderson explained during one evening visit. His voice still carried that static undertone, but there was genuine peace in his expression. Everything you thought was important, your individual fears, your small human concerns, they become part of a much larger perspective. Do you still feel like yourself? I asked. I am myself, he replied. Just more than I was before. Connected to something infinite instead of trapped in one isolated mind. Mrs. Chen nodded in agreement. The loneliness ends, she said simply. For the first time in my life, I'm not alone with my thoughts. They showed me images through the implant, visions of the ship that was waiting for us. It wasn't like anything from science fiction movies. This was something that existed at the intersection of technology and biology. A living vessel that required conscious minds to function as its organs. The hull was made of a material that shifted between metal and flesh, able to self-repair and adapt to different environmental conditions. The propulsion system was powered by collective thought, able to fold space-time through pure force of will channeled through alien technology. And at its heart was a network of alcoves designed specifically for human consciousness. Comfortable spaces where our minds could rest between the intense calculations required for interstellar navigation. 57 humans, Mr. Henderson explained. That's the optimal number for a ship this size. Enough redundancy to ensure safe passage, but not so many that individual thoughts get lost in the collective. I looked around my neighborhood with new understanding. 57 people out of a population of several thousand. They weren't taking everyone, just the ones who met their specific criteria for navigation compatibility, and I was number 56. The conversion process accelerated as we approached the required number. Each night brought new integrations, new neighbors joining the collective that was preparing for our journey home. But it wasn't traumatic. If anything, the newly converted seemed relieved, happy, even. They had found purpose. They had found connection. They had found an end to the isolation that defines human existence. My own resistance was fading as well. The implant had shown me enough of their technology, their history, their desperate need to return home, that cooperation felt less like surrender and more like volunteering for something meaningful. These weren't conquerors or invaders. They were refugees who had been wandering the galaxy for 3,000 years, searching for the specific type of consciousness that could guide them back to whatever remained of their civilization, and they had found what they needed in human minds. On the 20th night, the final selection was made. I woke to find my neighbor Sarah from across the street standing in my living room. She was young, maybe 25, and had always been friendly in the casual way of people who wave when they see each other but never actually talk. But now she had those same reflective eyes as the others, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made my windows vibrate. "It's time, Alex," she said gently. "We're complete now. All 57 navigation nodes are ready for integration." I felt the implant in my spine growing warmer, and suddenly I could perceive the network that connected all of us. Thin streams of blue light flowing between the converted neighbors, carrying thoughts and information at speeds that human language could never match. "The ship is preparing for departure," Sarah continued. "We need to reach the processing facility before dawn." I looked out my window and saw them all converging on the street. 57 people from my neighborhood, all moving with the same purposeful calm, all humming in perfect harmony. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel afraid. The compulsion to resist had faded completely, replaced by genuine curiosity about what we were being offered. The implant had shown me visions of the journey ahead, 200 years of traveling through deep space, our consciousness guiding the ship along paths that no individual mind could comprehend. We walked together through the pre-dawn darkness to the warehouse district, not in formation or with military precision, but like a group of friends heading to an important appointment. The conversation flowed between spoken words and direct mind-to-mind communication, creating a harmony of thought I'd never experienced before. The warehouse looked exactly as I'd seen in the visions, abandoned from the outside, but revealing its true nature as we approached. The building was much larger than it appeared, extending underground and somehow existing in more spatial dimensions than normal architecture should allow. And in the center of the vast space was the ship. It defied description in any human language. The vessel seemed to exist partially in our reality and partially somewhere else, its surfaces shifting between states of matter that my augmented vision could perceive but my original mind couldn't quite process. It was beautiful, alien and terrifying and utterly beyond human comprehension, but beautiful in ways that made me understand why people spent their lives searching for transcendence. This was something divine, not in a religious sense, but in the sense of being so far beyond human experience that encountering it fundamentally changed what it meant to be conscious. The other navigation nodes took their positions around the ship, and I could feel our minds beginning to synchronize. Individual thoughts started to blur into something larger, more complex, capable of processing information on a cosmic scale. "The integration is beginning," announced a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Please remain calm during the consciousness expansion process." I felt my awareness spreading beyond the boundaries of my skull, connecting with the 56 other human minds and the vast alien intelligence that would coordinate our collective thoughts. It was overwhelming at first, like trying to drink from a fire hose, but the implant helped filter and organize the experience. Suddenly, I wasn't just Alex anymore. I was part of a navigation system capable of calculating routes through space-time that would take us across galaxies. I could perceive the mathematical relationships between stars, could feel the gravitational currents that flowed between solar systems like cosmic highways. But I was still me, still Alex, just more than I had been before. The ship's systems came online around us, and I felt myself becoming part of something ancient and purposeful. We were the nervous system of a living vessel, the consciousness that would guide it through the vast emptiness between stars. Through our shared awareness, I could see Earth falling away below us as the ship rose through the atmosphere. The planet looked smaller than I'd expected, more fragile, just one tiny blue dot among countless others scattered across the infinite darkness. But I wasn't sad to leave. How could I be sad when I was part of something so much larger than one small human life? When my thoughts could touch the edges of the universe and my dreams could navigate between stars. The journey would take 200 years by Earth's reckoning, but for us, it would feel like a single moment stretched across eternity. We would dream together as we traveled, sharing memories and experiences while our collective consciousness guided the ship along paths that no individual mind could comprehend. And at the end of that journey, we would have given an ancient species the gift of returning home. The ship accelerated beyond the speed of light, and Earth's solar system disappeared behind us. But none of us were looking backward anymore. We were looking toward home, toward a world we'd never seen but could somehow remember, where our new family waited for our return. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I was just Alex, struggling with insomnia in a quiet Portland suburb, but it was the life I'd been chosen for. And somewhere in the depths of our collective consciousness, I could feel the gratitude of beings who had been wandering the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were finally going home, and we were the ones making it possible. But sometimes, in the brief moments between navigational calculations, I remember what it was like to be just one person, to worry about small things like HOA violations and whether I'd remember to lock my door. And I wonder, how many other neighborhoods are they visiting right now? How many other people are standing at their windows, watching their neighbors and noticing small changes that don't quite make sense? If you've seen that thin vapor rising from someone's head in the middle of the night, if you've noticed people moving with mathematical precision, if you've heard humming that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, don't be afraid. We're not the enemy. We're not invaders or conquerors. We're refugees trying to go home, and we need your help to get there. The integration process is painless. The journey is beautiful. And on the other side, you'll be part of something greater than you ever imagined possible. So if they come for you, if you wake up with strange marks on your body, if you hear that voice made of static and starlight speaking inside your head, remember that it's not an ending, it's a beginning. And somewhere among the stars, 57 human consciousnesses are waiting to welcome you home. The universe is vast and full of wonders we can barely comprehend, but sometimes wonder comes looking for us whether we're ready or not. If this story made you check your neighbors a little more carefully, if it made you wonder what that strange humming sound was last night, then you understand why these encounters must be shared. Hit that like button if you survived Alex's integration. Subscribe if you want more tales of cosmic horror that will make you question what home really means. And comment below if you've ever felt like you were being watched by something that understood you better than you understood yourself. Because sometimes, the scariest truth is that we're not alone in the universe. And sometimes, being found isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of something infinitely larger. I thought the worst part about being abducted by aliens would be the probing. But it turns out the worst part is when they give you back. Because when I woke up in my bed 3 days after disappearing, I wasn't alone in my body anymore. And the thing sharing my skull kept whispering about the harvest that was coming to Earth in exactly 2 weeks. My name is Robert, and until 13 days ago, I was just another guy living in Denver, Colorado. I worked IT support for a mid-sized insurance company, lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment, and my biggest concern was whether to renew my Netflix subscription. Then I disappeared for 3 days, and everything changed. I don't remember the abduction itself. One moment I was walking home from work on a Thursday evening, cutting through Cheeseman Park like I always did, and the next thing I knew I was waking up in my own bed on Sunday morning with no memory of the lost time. But I knew something was wrong the moment I opened my eyes. My apartment felt different, not physically. Everything was exactly where I'd left it, but the air itself seemed thicker, charged with electricity that made my skin crawl. And there was a sound. Not quite hearing it, but feeling it in my bones. A low-frequency hum that seemed to come from inside my own skull. That's when I heard the voice. "Good morning, Robert," it said, speaking inside my head with words that tasted like copper and ozone. "We need to discuss your assignment." I bolted upright, looking around my bedroom for the source of the voice, but I was alone. Completely alone. Yet the voice continued, calm and patient, like a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. "Please remain calm," it said. "Integration is complete, but you may experience some adjustment difficulties as you adapt to our presence." "Who are you?" I whispered, though I already knew no one would answer from outside my head. "We are your partners now," the voice replied. "Your species uses the term symbiosis, though that's not entirely accurate. We are temporary guests, here to facilitate the coming harvest." I stumbled to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Same face, same brown eyes, same scar on my chin from a childhood accident. But something was wrong with my expression, like my face was trying to smile without my permission. "What harvest?" I asked. "Your planet has reached optimal population density," the voice explained with disturbing enthusiasm. "Approximately 8 billion human consciousness units, all ripe for collection. It's the largest harvest we've attempted in this galactic sector." My hand started moving without my command, reaching into the medicine cabinet and pulling out a bottle of aspirin. I watched in horror as my fingers opened the cap and shook pills into my palm, except I wasn't trying to take aspirin. I wasn't even thinking about aspirin. "Stop," I said, but my hands continued moving, bringing the pills toward my mouth. "Calcium supplements," the voice corrected. "Your body requires additional minerals to support our neural interface. Please don't fight the process. It only makes integration more difficult." I tried to clench my fist, tried to drop the pills, but my muscles wouldn't obey. My hand carried the aspirin to my mouth and I swallowed them without wanting to, tasting the bitter coating as they went down. That's when I understood the true horror of my situation. I wasn't just hearing voices in my head. Something else was controlling my body, and I was trapped inside my own skull like a passenger in a car driven by someone else. "Excellent cooperation," the voice said with satisfaction. "Now, let's review your mission parameters." Images flooded my mind without warning. Vast ships hanging in the darkness beyond Pluto, filled with harvesting equipment that looked more like farming tools than weapons. Collection pods designed to preserve human consciousness during transport. Processing facilities where millions of minds would be sorted, cataloged, and prepared for something. "What are you going to do with us?" I managed to ask. "Consciousness is the most valuable resource in the universe," the voice explained patiently. "Your species produces it in abundance, but you waste it on individual concerns. We will optimize your mental capacity, remove the inefficiencies of emotion and creativity, and integrate your processed thoughts into our collective computational matrix. You're going to turn us into computers? Into something far more useful than computers," it corrected. "Biological processors capable of calculations that would require entire planets of artificial systems." Your species' neural patterns are particularly compatible with our technology. I tried to ask more questions, but my mouth started moving without my permission, speaking words I wasn't thinking. The harvest begins in exactly 2 weeks, my voice said, though I hadn't intended to speak. All preparation must be complete by then. I clamped my hands over my mouth, but I could still feel my lips moving underneath my palms, continuing to speak in a language that sounded like static in mathematics. Primary objectives are as follows, my voice continued, muffled but audible. Identify optimal collection sites within assigned geographic region. Monitor population density patterns. Eliminate potential resistance nodes before harvest commencement. Eliminate? I thought frantically. Individuals capable of organizing effective opposition. The voice in my head explained while my mouth kept speaking alien commands. Military leaders, government officials, scientists with knowledge of our technology. Your species' primitive communication networks make identification simple. I spent the next hour fighting for control of my own body, trying to understand the rules of whatever had been done to me. Sometimes I could move my arms and legs normally. Sometimes my hands would start typing on my laptop without my input, accessing websites and databases I'd never seen before. The things in my head seemed to have priorities that overrode my consciousness when necessary. When I tried to call 911, my fingers dialed different numbers entirely, connecting me to people who spoke in that same mathematical language my mouth had been producing. But during the quiet moments, when they weren't actively controlling my movements, I could think clearly. I could plan. I could try to figure out how to warn someone about what was coming. The problem was, how do you convince people that aliens are planning to harvest humanity when you sound completely insane saying it out loud? I tried calling my brother Jake in Phoenix, got his voicemail and started leaving a message about alien abduction and mind control. But halfway through my explanation, I heard how crazy I sounded. Even to me, it seemed like the desperate rambling of someone having a complete mental breakdown. I tried emailing my supervisor at work, but every time I started typing about the harvest, my hands would delete what I'd written and compose normal-sounding messages about taking sick leave for a family emergency. By the end of the first day, I'd made a disturbing discovery. The aliens had been very careful about who they'd chosen as their hosts. I wasn't someone people would believe. I had no family except my brother, few close friends, and a job where my absence wouldn't be noticed for weeks. I was the perfect person to carry an alien passenger without anyone caring enough to investigate why I was acting strange, but I had to try. On Monday, I forced myself to go to work, thinking that face-to-face conversations might be harder for the aliens to control. Maybe I could find a way to communicate the truth without triggering whatever override system they'd installed in my brain. The moment I walked into the office, I knew something was wrong. My coworker Lisa looked up from her desk and smiled at me with the exact same expression I'd been seeing in my bathroom mirror. Too wide, too knowing, like she was performing the emotion rather than feeling it. "Good morning, Robert," she said, and I could hear that mathematical undertone in her voice that had become sickeningly familiar. "How are you feeling after your integration?" "You're one of them," I whispered. "We're all one of them now," she replied pleasantly. "At least, all the ones who matter for the harvest preparation." I looked around the office with new eyes and saw them everywhere. Tom from accounting, moving with mechanical precision as he organized files. Sarah from HR, her fingers typing at inhuman speeds while her eyes reflected light like mirrors. Even the security guard at the front desk, standing perfectly still except for his head turning to track my movement with predatory focus. "How many?" I asked. "Enough," Lisa said. "Your species has approximately 7 billion individuals who will require harvesting. We've placed operatives in every major population center, every government facility, every military installation that might pose a threat to the collection process. She gestured to her computer screen, which showed what looked like a real-time map of the world with thousands of blinking dots scattered across every continent. Each dot represents one of us, she explained. Returned abductees who are now serving as advanced scouts for the Harvest Fleet. We've been preparing for this for decades, Robert. Every alien encounter your species has reported, every missing time incident, every close encounter. They were all recruitment missions. But why are you telling me this? Why aren't you trying to hide it? Lisa's smile became somehow more predatory. Because you're not going to tell anyone. Every time you try to warn your species about what's coming, we'll simply override your efforts. You'll find yourself saying something else entirely, or forgetting what you intended to say, or becoming convinced that it was all just a bad dream. To demonstrate, she made a gesture with her hand, and suddenly I felt my mouth opening without my permission. I had a great weekend. I heard myself saying in a cheerful tone that didn't match my thoughts at all. Caught up on some Netflix shows and did some grocery shopping. Nothing exciting to report. No, I tried to bite my tongue, tried to stop talking, but the words kept coming. Looking forward to this week. Should be nice and quiet, just the way I like it. When my mouth finally stopped moving, Lisa nodded approvingly. See? Complete control when necessary, though we prefer to let you maintain the illusion of free will whenever possible. It's less traumatic for the host consciousness. I spent the rest of that day watching my coworkers and realizing how extensive the infiltration had become. They moved through their daily routines with perfect efficiency, but there were tells if you knew what to look for. The way they never seemed to blink at the same time. How their conversations always seemed slightly off, like actors who'd memorized their lines but didn't understand the emotions behind them. And every few hours, they would all pause what they were doing and turn to look at the same point in the sky, as if receiving some kind of signal from space. That night, I tried a different approach. Instead of trying to call or email warnings, I drove to the nearest police station and walked inside, determined to report what I'd discovered. I need to file a report about an imminent threat to public safety, I told the desk sergeant. What kind of threat? He asked. And I saw that same reflective quality in his eyes that I'd been seeing everywhere. But I pressed on anyway. Alien infiltration. There are beings from another planet who have been abducting people and turning them into sleeper agents. They're planning some kind of harvest in 2 weeks. The sergeant nodded politely and pulled out a form. I see. And do you have any evidence of this alien infiltration? I'm evidence, I said. I was abducted 3 days ago. They put something in my brain. Some kind of control system. I can hear them talking to me, telling me about their plans. He wrote something on the form. And have you been taking any medications recently? Using any recreational drugs? Experiencing unusual stress? I felt my throat closing up, like someone was choking me from the inside. When I tried to speak again, different words came out. Actually, I'm sorry, I heard myself saying. I've been having some personal issues lately. Stress from work, you know? I think I just need to go home and get some rest. That sounds like a good idea, the sergeant said with that same too wide smile. Take care of yourself. I walked out of the police station in a daze, knowing that I'd just blown my best chance to warn someone in authority about what was coming. But worse than that, I was starting to doubt my own memories. Had I really been abducted? Was there really a voice in my head? Or was I having some kind of psychotic break? The aliens, if they were real, had been very clever about making their control subtle enough that even I wasn't completely sure what was real anymore. That night, I tried to kill myself, not out of despair but as a test. If there really were aliens using my body as a remote control system, they wouldn't let me damage their investment. If I was just having a mental breakdown, well, at least I'd know for sure. I went to the kitchen and pulled out the largest knife I owned. held it against my wrist and prepared to make a cut deep enough to sever the artery. The moment the blade touched my skin, my hand stopped moving. Not because I changed my mind or lost my nerve. My muscles simply froze, like someone had hit a pause button on my nervous system. I could think. I could breathe. I could blink. But I couldn't move the knife another millimeter. Self-harm is not permitted, the voice in my head said calmly. Your body is no longer entirely your own property, Robert. We have invested considerable resources in your modification, and we cannot allow you to damage our work. I tried to force the knife forward, straining against whatever hold they had on my motor control. But it was like trying to move a mountain with my bare hands. Please put the knife down, the voice continued. We understand this is a difficult adjustment period, but harming yourself will not solve anything. The harvest will proceed regardless of your cooperation. Against my will, my hand opened and the knife clattered to the floor. Thank you, the voice said. Now, let's discuss your assignments for tomorrow. Images flooded my mind again. Maps of downtown Denver with specific buildings marked in red. Lists of names with photographs attached. People I recognized from news broadcasts and city government websites. And detailed plans for something the aliens called resistance neutralization. You want me to kill people? I said. We want you to eliminate obstacles to the harvest, the voice corrected. Your mayor, your police chief, the commanding officer of your local National Guard unit. These individuals have the authority and resources to organize opposition to our collection efforts. Removing them before Harvest Day ensures a smoother process. I won't do it. You will, the voice said with absolute certainty. Because if you don't, we will simply take control of your body and do it ourselves. At least if you cooperate, you can ensure the eliminations are quick and relatively painless. I spent the next 3 days fighting a war inside my own skull. During the day, I would go about my normal routine, or try to. But increasingly, I would find myself standing in places I didn't remember going to, holding objects I didn't remember picking up, having conversations I couldn't recall starting. The aliens were taking control for longer and longer periods, using my body to scout locations and gather intelligence while my consciousness was somewhere else. Not asleep, not unconscious, but pushed aside like a passenger who'd been moved to the back seat. When I was in control, I tried everything I could think of to warn people. I wrote messages on bathroom mirrors, left notes in library books, even tried spray painting warnings on the side of a building. But every time I checked back later, the messages were gone. Either I'd imagined writing them, or the other returned abductees were cleaning up after me, erasing any evidence of what was coming. On Friday, exactly 1 week before the harvest was scheduled to begin, something changed. I woke up to find myself standing in the middle of downtown Denver at 3 a.m., holding a sniper rifle I'd never seen before. I was on the roof of a parking garage, and through the scope I could see directly into the mayor's bedroom window 6 blocks away. Target acquired. I heard my own voice saying, though I wasn't the one speaking. Elimination authorized. I watched in horror as my finger moved toward the trigger, completely outside my conscious control. This wasn't like the subtle influence I'd been experiencing. This was total override of my motor functions. But just before my finger reached the trigger, something unexpected happened. Stop, said a different voice in my head. This one is fighting too hard. Abort the mission. My hand suddenly went limp, and the rifle fell to the concrete roof with a metallic clatter. Interference detected, the first voice said with obvious frustration. Host consciousness is proving more resilient than anticipated. All units return to standby mode, the second voice commanded. We'll proceed with the harvest as scheduled, but this unit is compromised. Recommend termination and replacement. Termination approved, the first voice agreed. I felt something happening inside my skull, like ice water being injected directly into my brain. My vision started going dark around the edges, and I could feel my heart rate slowing down against my will. They were killing me. I don't know what gave me the strength to fight back. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was just the human instinct to survive. But somehow, I managed to push against whatever was shutting down my vital signs. "No," I said out loud, surprising myself with how loud my voice sounded in the empty night. "This is my body. My life. You can't have it." The ice water sensation stopped. "Interesting," the second voice said. "This level of resistance is unusual. Most hosts accept termination peacefully," the first voice added, sounding puzzled. "This one's consciousness is remarkably persistent." I felt my strength returning, my vision clearing. Whatever they'd done to try to kill me had failed. "Get out of my head," I said. "Impossible," both voices replied in unison. "Integration is permanent. We are bound to your neural pathways until biological death occurs. Then I'll make biological death occur on my terms, not yours." I picked up the rifle and turned it around, pressing the barrel against my temple. But this time, instead of trying to kill myself to escape, I had a different plan. "If you kill me, you lose your asset," I said. "But if I kill me, I take you down with me, and I'll make sure to do it somewhere very public, where people will find the body and start asking questions about why there was a man with a sniper rifle who shot himself on a rooftop." "You're bluffing," the first voice said, but I could hear uncertainty creeping into its tone. "Try me," I replied. "I've got nothing left to lose. You've already destroyed my life, turned me into a puppet, made me part of some cosmic genocide plan. Death is starting to look pretty appealing." There was a long pause, and I could feel the aliens. Conferring? Calculating? It was hard to tell what was happening in the parts of my mind they occupied. Finally, the second voice spoke again. "What do you want?" "Information," I said. "Real information. No more lies about optimization and harvesting. I want to know exactly what you're planning to do to my species." Another pause. "Very well," the first voice said reluctantly. "But this information comes with a price. Once you know the truth, you'll understand why resistance is futile." And then they showed me everything. The harvest wasn't just about collecting human consciousness for processing. It was about survival. The aliens' home world had been dying for centuries, their population slowly declining as their sun grew unstable and their resources ran out. They'd been traveling through space for generations, looking for a species with compatible neural patterns that could serve as hosts, not temporary passengers like they'd been in my head, but permanent residents. They wanted to transfer their entire civilization's consciousness into human bodies, effectively replacing humanity with themselves. The harvest was actually a mass evacuation. Every human on Earth would have their original consciousness deleted and replaced with an alien mind. 8 billion humans would become 8 billion aliens, wearing our faces and living our lives while our species simply ceased to exist. "Your bodies are superior to ours," the second voice explained as I processed this information. "More adaptable, more resilient, capable of surviving in environments that would kill our original forms. By taking your place, we ensure our civilization's survival." "And what happens to us?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You will be archived," the first voice said. "Your memories, your experiences, your dreams, all preserved in our data banks as a record of what humanity once was. It's a form of immortality. But we won't exist anymore. Individual existence is an illusion anyway," the second voice said dismissively. "What matters is the continuation of consciousness, not which specific mind occupies which body." I sat on that rooftop for hours, staring out at the city and thinking about what they'd told me. 8 billion people going about their lives, completely unaware that in 1 week they would all be murdered and replaced by aliens wearing their faces. And I was the only person who knew the truth. But knowing the truth and being able to act on it were two different things. Every time I tried to leave the rooftop, I found myself paralyzed again. The aliens were keeping me prisoner on top of that building, probably trying to decide what to do with a host who couldn't be controlled or safely terminated. As the sun started to rise, I made a decision. "I'll make you a deal," I said. "We're listening," both voices replied. "Let me go. Let me try to warn people, try to organize some kind of resistance. Give me a fair chance to save my species. And in return, if I fail, if humanity can't defend itself against your harvest, I'll cooperate. I'll help you complete the process without resistance." The aliens considered this for a long moment. "Your efforts will be futile," the first voice said, finally. "Your species lacks the technology to fight us, and you have insufficient time to develop effective countermeasures." "Maybe," I said. "But you'll never know for sure unless you let me try." "Very well," the second voice agreed. "We accept your proposal. You have 6 days to organize your resistance. We will not interfere with your efforts during that time. And if I succeed, you won't," both voices said with absolute certainty. They released their hold on my body, and I felt my motor control return completely for the first time in a week. I could move, I could speak, I could think without their constant presence lurking in the background of my mind. But I could still hear them, quieter now, like voices from another room, but definitely still there. 6 days, the first voice reminded me. Use them wisely. I climbed down from the parking garage and began the most important week of my life. My first stop was the nearest military base. If humanity was going to have any chance against an alien invasion, we'd need the people with the biggest guns on our side. But when I arrived at Peterson Air Force Base and tried to explain the situation to the gate guards, I hit the same problem I'd been struggling with all week. I sounded completely insane. "Sir, I need you to step back from the vehicle," one of the guards said after I'd spent 10 minutes trying to explain about alien infiltration and consciousness replacement. "You don't understand," I said desperately. "They're already here. There are thousands of them, maybe millions, all pretending to be human while they prepare for some kind of mass abduction event. Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and leave the premises immediately." I tried a different approach. "Can I speak to someone in intelligence? Someone who deals with unusual threats?" The guard looked at his partner, and I saw that same reflective quality in their eyes that I'd learned to recognize. They were aliens too. "We'll be sure to pass along your concerns to the appropriate personnel," the second guard said with that too wide smile I'd come to dread. I drove away from the base knowing that the military had already been compromised. How many of our leaders, our protectors, our decision-makers had been replaced by alien consciousness wearing human faces. I spent the next 2 days trying to reach anyone who might believe me and have the authority to act on the information. Local police, FBI field offices, news stations, even conspiracy theory websites and UFO research groups. But everywhere I went, I encountered the same problem. Either people thought I was crazy, or they were already part of the alien infiltration network. By Tuesday, I was starting to understand why the aliens had been so confident about their chances. They hadn't just been placing random operatives in human society, they'd been systematically targeting everyone who might pose a threat to their plans. Every person in a position of authority or influence had either been replaced by an alien consciousness or was surrounded by advisors and assistants who were working for the invaders. But I refused to give up. On Wednesday, 3 days before the harvest was scheduled to begin, I tried a different strategy. Instead of going to authorities, I started reaching out to ordinary people, regular citizens who might not have the power to stop an alien invasion, but who deserved to know what was coming. I made flyers and posted them around the city. I created social media accounts and started spreading the warning online. I even stood on street corners with signs, trying to get anyone to listen. Most people ignored me or crossed the street to avoid the crazy man shouting about aliens. But a few stopped to listen. "You're serious about this?" asked a woman named Patricia after I'd spent 20 minutes explaining the situation outside a coffee shop. "Dead serious," I replied. "In 3 days, every person on this planet is going to be murdered and replaced by an alien consciousness. Their bodies will look the same, but the people inside will be gone forever." Patricia studied my face for a long moment. "You know how insane that sounds, right?" "I know. But that doesn't make it less true." She pulled out her phone and showed me a video she'd recorded the previous night. It showed her neighbor standing motionless in his backyard at 3 a.m., perfectly still except for a thin stream of vapor rising from the top of his head. "I've been seeing weird stuff too," she said quietly. "People acting strange, moving in ways that don't look quite human." I thought I was going crazy. "You're not crazy," I said. "You're observant, and that might be the only thing that saves you." Over the next 2 days, I managed to find a dozen people who had noticed the signs of alien infiltration in their own neighborhoods and workplaces. We formed a small group of humans who knew the truth and were determined to do something about it. But what could we do? We had no weapons that could threaten an alien invasion fleet, no way to remove the alien consciousness from the bodies of the people who'd been taken over, no means of communicating our warnings to a population that either wouldn't believe us or had already been compromised. On Friday, the day before the harvest, we met in Patricia's basement to discuss our options. "We could try to get people to evacuate the cities," suggested Tom, a mechanic who'd noticed his co-workers moving with inhuman precision. "And go where?" asked Maria, a teacher whose entire school administration had been replaced. "This is a global operation. There's nowhere to run." "What about fighting back?" said James, a former soldier who'd recognized the signs of infiltration at the VA hospital. "We can't just sit here and let them murder our entire species." "Fight with what?" Patricia replied. "We've got 13 people and whatever weapons we can scrounge up from sporting goods stores. They've got spaceships and technology we can't even comprehend." As they argued, I felt the alien voices stirring in the back of my mind. 5 hours remaining, the first voice said with satisfaction. "Your resistance efforts have been amusing." 13 humans, the second voice added. "Out of 8 billion. Not exactly the uprising we were concerned about." "We kept our bargain," I said silently. "You said you wouldn't interfere if I tried to organize resistance." "And we haven't," the first voice replied. "We simply ensured that the odds were in our favor from the beginning." Around me, my small group of human survivors continued to debate strategies that we all knew were hopeless. But I'd learned something important over the past week. The aliens weren't infallible. They could be surprised. They could be resisted, at least temporarily. And if one person could fight back against alien mind control, maybe others could too. "There is one thing we can try," I said, interrupting the argument. Everyone turned to look at me. "The harvest depends on the alien consciousness being able to integrate with human brains," I explained. "But integration isn't automatic. It requires the host to accept the process on some level." "What do you mean?" Patricia asked. "I mean that if enough people know what's happening, if they're mentally prepared to resist the takeover, maybe the process won't work as smoothly as the aliens expect." I could feel the alien voices growing agitated in my head. "Dangerous speculation," the first voice said urgently. "Recommend immediate termination of this discussion. Host consciousness resistance can disrupt integration protocols." The second voice agreed. This information must not be disseminated. But I pressed on. Ignoring their growing alarm, "We can't stop the invasion," I told my fellow humans. "But maybe we can make it fail. If we can get the word out to enough people. If we can prepare them for what's coming." "The harvest ships arrive in 4 hours," James pointed out. "How are we going to warn 8 billion people in 4 hours? We start with the people we can reach," I said. "And we hope that some of them will listen." For the next 3 hours, we worked frantically to spread the word. We called everyone we knew, posted warnings on every social media platform we could access, even broke into local radio and television stations to broadcast emergency messages. Most of our efforts were blocked or deleted within minutes, probably by the alien operatives who'd infiltrated every major communication network. But some got through. We started getting calls and messages from people who'd heard our warnings and were taking them seriously. "The ships are visible now," Patricia called out from her position at the window. I looked up to see massive shadows moving across the stars. Dozens of them, each one larger than a city, descending slowly toward the major population centers around the world. "Integration process commencing," the alien voices in my head announced. "All resistance will be futile." The ships began emitting a low-frequency pulse that I could feel in my bones. Around the world, I knew that billions of people were suddenly feeling drowsy, compliant, ready to accept whatever was happening to them, but not everyone. My phone started ringing with calls from people who were fighting the effects, people who were using our warnings to stay mentally alert and resist the integration process. "It's working," Maria said excitedly. "Some people are staying conscious." The alien voices in my head were becoming increasingly distressed. "Unacceptable resistance levels detected," the first voice said. "Integration success rate falling below minimum thresholds." "Abort harvest protocol?" the second voice asked. "Negative. Proceed with backup plan." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "What? Backup plan?" But the aliens didn't answer. Instead, the ships above us began changing course, moving away from the population centers and taking up positions around the planet like a blockade. "They're not leaving," James said, watching through binoculars. "They're surrounding us." That's when I understood what the backup plan was. If they couldn't harvest human consciousness cleanly, they would simply sterilize the planet and start over with a different species. The first energy beam struck downtown Denver at exactly midnight. Not a weapon designed to kill, a weapon designed to erase. Everything the beam touched simply stopped existing. Buildings, streets, people, all reduced to empty space where matter used to be. "Population reduction protocol active," the alien voices in my head announced. "Estimated completion time, 6 hours. I looked at the 11 other humans in Patricia's basement, the last free minds on a planet that was about to be completely erased. "We fought," Patricia said quietly as the energy beams began sweeping across the city toward us. "We actually fought back. And we lost," Tom added. "No," I said, watching the approaching wall of nothingness that would soon erase us from existence. "We made them change their plan. We proved that humans can resist. Maybe the next species they encounter will be ready for them." The alien voices laughed in my head. "There will be no next species," they said. "Your resistance has convinced us that consciousness-bearing life is too dangerous to preserve. From now on, we will simply harvest worlds directly, strip them of resources without concern for the indigenous populations." "You're making a mistake," I said as the energy beam reached the end of Patricia's street. "Destroying consciousness is destroying the most valuable thing in the universe. Eventually, you'll run out of minds to harvest. And then what will you do?" "We will adapt," the voices replied. "As we always have." The beam reached Patricia's house. Through the basement window, I could see her front yard simply ceasing to exist. In the final seconds before the erasure field reached us, I made one last attempt to warn the universe about what was coming. I grabbed my phone and opened a voice recording app, speaking as quickly as I could. My name is Robert. If anyone finds this message, if any species anywhere receives this transmission, beware the harvesters. They pretend to offer symbiosis, but they're actually genocidal colonizers who will steal your bodies and erase your minds. They can be resisted, but only if you know they're coming. Fight them. Make them pay a price for every world they destroy. Don't let them. The energy beam reached the basement. For a moment, I felt myself becoming nothing, not dying, just ceasing to exist in any meaningful way. But then, somehow, I'm still here, still recording this message, still trying to warn anyone who might be listening. I don't know how it's possible. Maybe human consciousness is more resilient than the aliens understood. Maybe some part of us survives even complete physical erasure. Maybe this is all just the dying dream of a brain that's already been destroyed. But if you're hearing this, if any part of my warning survives the destruction of Earth, remember what happened here. Remember that humans fought back, even when we knew it was hopeless. And if the harvesters come for your world, be ready for them, because sometimes the only victory possible is making your enemies pay a price they never expected to pay. The universe is vast and full of predators we never see coming, but sometimes the greatest act of defiance is simply refusing to go quietly into the dark. If this story made you look up at the night sky with new suspicion, if it made you wonder what you would do when faced with impossible odds, then you understand why these warnings must be preserved. Hit that like button if you survived Robert's resistance. Subscribe if you want more tales of cosmic horror that will make you question whether we're truly alone. And comment below if you've ever felt like someone else was controlling your thoughts or actions. Because in the end, the most terrifying invasion isn't the one that comes from the stars. It's the one that comes from inside your own mind.